some judges that
You lose your land.
Yes, yes. We had one judge, for instance, about maybe 2 years ago, when he ruled in favor of one of the opposition members who had been arrested. Suddenly, the First Lady was interested in his land. He had a very well-run farm, which he had been given by the government, and it was taken from him. So, I mean, that's real. We've had one judge literally hounded out of the country with spurious allegations against him. Any number of things can happen. So, you know, and when you went in, when you are one of these new judges, you went in on the strict understanding that you were going in there to rule in favor of ZANU-PF, of Robert Mugabe's party.
Well, Judy, may I have permission? Can we start? The question, may we do that, Lynn?
Okay.
Oh, all right.
One question, and then we'll start the Q&A.
All right. Actually, it's sort of on that theme. No independent judiciary, no freedom of the press. What would it take to transform this society into democracy?
Well, we've tried. I mean, the thing is, you know, the question I constantly get asked at the moment is in relation to the context of the Arab Spring. People say, listen, there's been the Arab Spring. There's, you know, democracy is breaking out all over North Africa. We've seen Egypt. We've seen Tunisia. We've seen, to some extent, Libya, Syria going on, etc. You know, will this affect Zimbabwe? I mean, to which there are two answers. The first is to show you how paranoid it's made Mugabe feel, which is there has been a court case in Zimbabwe recently where someone from the University of Zimbabwe got together a group of people simply to show them actually CNN footage of what was going on in Tunisia and Egypt, and they all got arrested and charged with high treason. Just for watching CNN of that. So that shows you how sort of paranoid they are. But the thing that sometimes gets overlooked when we look at the Arab Spring and the outcomes in the Arab Spring is that it's, on the one hand, yes, you've got people rising up, but what's crucial to whether they've succeeded or not is how the security forces have reacted to that. So in Tunisia and crucially in Egypt, the security forces realized that the gig was up.
That's right.
And they wanted to be on the right side, so they flipped like that, and they were successful. In Libya, they split, and so there was a civil war. And in Syria, so far, they've maintained repression. The big difference in Zimbabwe, if you tried to do that, you wouldn't be able to put primroses down the barrels of the soldiers' rifles because they would meet live bullets coming the other way. And we have a security force that's highly partisan, that's completely, you know, that's controlled by Mugabe, and that he will use, that he'll have no compunction to use it. And that's what, you know, people live in a state of fear, and it's a real fear. It's based on a reality.
All right. There are some questions in the audience. Let's see if we can respond. All right.
If you have a question, if you would raise your hand or stand, I'll try to get the microphone to you. Questions?
Granted, Mugabe has longevity in his family. He's not immortal. He's got to go at some point. What happens post Mugabe?
You know, it's obviously the $64 million question, I suppose. The problem is Mugabe is the only president that independent Zimbabwe has ever known. He was the first president voted in 1980. And so with someone, basically sucks all the political oxygen out of the room. And that we can speculate, and I will briefly, but the truth of the matter is that none of us know. We really don't know, because when someone has so completely dominated the leadership on the political stage, on the national stage, and suddenly goes, there'll be a vacuum. There will be a vacuum. And it's very hard to anticipate exactly how it will play out. Now, one of the things that he hasn't been able to do, and if you were to say, to take him to, you know, say, take it to a management consultant and say, we have a small problem here, we are a small Southern African dictatorship with a very elderly leader who's likely to die soon, he would like to stay in power, you know, what would you suggest? And they would send some very highly paid management consultants and say, and my guess is that what they would say is, listen, while you're still alive and compos mentis. What you should do is nominate your successor. Immediately try and give him all of your authority and say, this is my person, this is going to be the new mini-me when I leave, etc., etc. And that person would then have somehow be clothed in the same legitimacy and power and all the sort of myth of the struggle and everything. And that's how you do it. But Mugabe has been unable to do that. And there are sort of two reasons which are kind of complementary but maybe contradictory, and I'm not sure. One of them is the sheer hubris of a dictator. That the whole point of being a dictator is that you're terrified of your own mortality and that you want to believe that you'll rule forever. And Mugabe has been making some weird statements about, being the voice beyond the grave almost. It's as though he's going to carry on trying to rule after he's dead. But he has a real practical problem too, which is that there are factions within his own party. And if he nominates the leader of one faction, as soon as you have a victor, you have a loser. And the loser gets annoyed, and the party may split, that person may move to the opposition, taking his own constituency with him. I mean, he faces a real problem within his own party. And in the last few weeks, there's been an astonishing development, which is that one of the potential successors to Mugabe is the deputy president, Joyce Mujuru, whose real power came through her husband, Solomon Mujuru, who was a very senior general through the Liberation War and in the Zimbabwe National Army. And he died under very mysterious circumstances, a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now, and he was burnt literally to a cinder in a house fire in which very little else was damaged. So the rumour mills of Harare are buzzing, and everybody seems to think that there was foul play in some way or other. So we're at a very volatile period right now anyway. Obviously, what one would like to see is that the country move straight to a democracy, a proper democracy post-Mugabe, and for there to be a free and fair election. And that's a possibility, or it's possible that one or other faction within ZANU will simply try and grab the mantle and carry on with business as usual.
Sorry, I have a question. I just finished your book, The Fear, and it was incredible. Couldn't put it down. I'm trying to understand now the shared government and suppose it, with no longer having a Zimbabwean dollar being traded. The scoop that we're getting, peripherally, let's say on the tourism side, is that go to Zimbabwe, it's safe, there's food, there's fuel, the country is rebounding with this shared government. Do you see it? Or is this just the tip of what we've been told? And also the travel ban being lifted, supposedly.
I'm going to let Beatrice take this initially, and then I'll say something after.
Well, this was supposed to be a transitional sort of a mechanism, so that we put in place oversight institutions that would lead ultimately to free and fair elections. Unfortunately, it hasn't quite worked that way because, of course, Robert Mugabe remains in complete control. He remains in charge, so he's determining the pace of what is actually happening in Zimbabwe. If he wants to unleash his militia on you, he'll do it. And even members of his own, the coalition government belonging to the opposition are subject to arrest quite regularly. In fact, this year I've already had to defend 3 of them when they've been arrested and locked up. So he's making even that arrangement difficult to really carry forward with any sort of seriousness, because you can't be a partner but be subject to the control of your partner in a coalition government. But in terms of tourism, actually it's quite safe for tourists. And you can come because you're not a threat to him. You're not going to come there and say, away with Mugabe or whatever. If you do that, of course, you get into trouble. But generally, if you just go there to go and see the Victoria Falls, yes, that's fine. The food is there if you come with your American dollar. It's not a problem. You'll have a good time. So for tourists, there's absolutely no problem because we are all sort of transiting through. We're transient, and you're not really going to be challenging Robert Mugabe in his own backyard, as it were.
Simple, Peter.
Yeah, I mean, Beatrice is absolutely right. And the fact is that any improvement that we've seen in Zimbabwe since this so-called hybrid government came in 2009, the vast majority of it is really because we abandoned the Zimbabwe dollar, which was just, had become worthless. I mean, it is now officially in the Guinness Book of Records as the highest denomination bill ever made. What was it, 100 trillion or something ridiculous. And now we just use American dollars. I mean, that's all. That's what Zimbabwe now uses. But it's given a kind of at least some stability. People can pay their bills and do transactions and run businesses and things, which basically it had become untenable. And by the end of the Zimbabwe dollar, people were sort of ignoring it, and everything was being done on the black market. But Beatrice is right. We're sitting in this still in a transition. So there's been no real investment apart from the Chinese coming in and basically taking resources. There's minerals and things. There's been you'd be kind of mad to invest in a serious way that your property rights would be in doubt. There's still all sorts of legislation that may or may not come in about whether you own things as a foreign investor coming in. And indeed, there's a hugely volatile political situation that has to give at some point. It's sort of sitting on that fulcrum still.
Peter's going to be signing his book in the lobby. We have time for one more question. All right.
I would like to know, Beatrice, how do you stay safe?
Well, I come to America to receive awards, so that keeps me out of the way a little bit. But I mean, my attitude is that I'm not doing anything unlawful. I'm just doing my job. And my attitude to Mugabe's people is that if you don't want me doing this, then you just stop the abuses. I do keep safe most of the time, by ensuring that I'm very visible. And I think my visibility has helped in a lot of ways because I get away with things that most other people wouldn't be able to get away with. And I was telling a story of how the justice minister once called me because his office was jammed with protests from all over the world after they had beaten me up. And he was extremely annoyed that their entire communication system was shut down through these protests. And like, who the hell do you know in Japan? Why are there so many people, protesting about you being beaten up from Japan? And I said, I don't know them, but the only way that you're going to stop, them protesting is if you don't abuse lawyers for doing their work. So, I've been lucky in a way. That's how I've kept safe. When I have been beaten up, it has caused such a huge stir that people don't want to have to deal with, the kind of protest that they receive. So I think the visibility has helped to a large extent.
Ladies and gentlemen, Beatrice Mtetwa, Peter Godwin.
Thank you all for coming. And Peter will be in the lobby signing books. If you did not purchase the book before the lecture, you can do that now. And he'll be sitting at a table out in the lobby. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Oh, yeah.